Hello, everybody. A couple of weeks ago, we did a show, our weekly tech roundup with my old Silicon Valley friend or frenemy, adversary, intellectually at least, Keith Teare. He's always a tech optimist. He believes that AI will result in what he calls a win-win-win. He believes that users, publishers, and AI will all win in this latest exuberance. He believes that our current exuberance is rational. I'm not sure. And one of the areas that I think is particularly interesting in terms of the impact of AI on content is in podcasting, which is, of course, what we're doing now. One man who knows as much about podcasting, I think, as anyone is my old friend Marshall Poe. He's the founder of the New Books Network, which is an aggregation of independent podcasts. He puts them together. So he's all too familiar with podcasting. And in fact, the beginning of the year or late last year, we did a show on why 2024 was a bad year for most podcasters. We'll get to the impact of 2025 on it. Marshall, as always, welcome from your home in Northampton, Massachusetts. What's your take, Keith? I was going to call you, that's a Freudian error, Marshall. What's your take, Marshall, on Keith Teare's idea that AI is going to be a win-win-win for publishers and big tech and users?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two ways to approach that question. Publishers in particular, I don't think it's going to be very good for publishers or for authors. And it probably won't be good for consumers of things that are authored and published. And then the more general point, and the point that I kind of really want to make, and this podcast was occasioned by an exchange we had, is that we've now really entered an era in which the theft of IP, intellectual property, broadly construed, is an accepted business model. And AI, in that sense, isn't new. It's just better at it than the other techniques that some of these companies use to steal intellectual property. So I don't see any great revolution in that sense. The business model is take what people produce, don't pay for it, repackage it or rebroadcast it, stick advertising on it, and get rich. And so, this is obviously something we should be concerned about.
So in other words, we've been here before, Marshall. You and I were actually around 20, 25 years ago when the Web 2.0 revolution announced.
Right. I mean, you remember Napster and LimeWire. I mean,
yeah, it was all the premise of free for everyone. Everyone benefits. The artist, the user, the music companies. But of course, there was only one group of people who really benefited from that, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, and I remember when I first saw, it was about 2001, I first saw Napster, and I admit that I just went crazy on it. I just downloaded zillions of songs and put them on my iPod and my computer. I should not have done that. That should have been illegal and probably was illegal. It was a bad thing to do.
You could get arrested, Marshall. We don't want any more confessions because we need you to defend civilization. You've talked about this idea, and maybe correct me, you described it as a kind of mass larceny where everyone or certain tech companies, big tech AI companies, are stealing content and reselling it. What exactly is happening? Are the companies, the classic ones like OpenAI and Anthropic, the two leading AI startups who are now developing AI co-workers? Is it Google, who are also benefiting from this? Who exactly is doing the stealing here?
Before I answer that question, can I just take a step back? I'll get to Google and Anthropic and these things, but I think there's an important point a historical point that needs to be made, and I'm a historian, so this always appeals to me. And that is, we have to go back to the 1980s, really. I think it's the 1980s. And this notion that information wants to be free, which is usually attributed to Stuart Brand.
My old friend, another interesting character.
And of course, it's kind of crazy even to think information wants to be free because information is not a person, so it can't want anything. But if we can just bypass that for a second, I actually have here on my screen the original quote, and I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what it really should say now and what it means now. So this is Brand talking to Steve Wozniak. On the one hand, you have the point you're making is that information sort of wants to be expensive because it is so valuable. The right information in the right place just changes your life. On the other hand, information almost wants to be free because the costs of getting it out there is getting lower and lower all the time. So you have these two things fighting against each other. That's the end of the quote, and he makes a good point there, but I would adjust one sentence there, and that is, on the other hand, information almost wants to be free because the cost of stealing it is getting lower and lower all the time. And that's the real revolution, is that basically this sort of larceny on a mass scale has become incredibly cheap. You can have machines do it. You don't have to do it yourself. You don't have to be a plagiarist. You can train an AI to do it, and it will go get everybody's content, rebroadcast it or repackage it, and then sell it back to you. And so in that sense, information does, information I don't think wants to be stolen.
Well,
does it? Maybe it does.
Take your point, and as you know, you and I have a long history on this. I'm in your camp. I'm one of the founders of the camp. But I wonder, you brought up Stewart Brand and information want to be free. When just as you said it, I was listening to, of course, but I also used the internet to get a shot of Stewart Brand and of his ideas about information wanting to be free from Wikipedia. Wikipedia gives this stuff out for free. So that content adds to the nature of our conversation. What's wrong with information wanting to be free? No, Stewart Brand on Wikipedia, it's a valuable resource.
Right.
There's a special there's a special section on Wikipedia on information wanting to be free. Isn't that the dream, Marshall? I have access to this. I don't have to pay anyone. There's some sort of collective endeavor to put this information together, and we all win.
I mean, I think that's right, but I think you have to give a little bit more nuanced or a deeper kind of understanding. Where does that information come from? It comes from people, actual people with blood in their veins and brains in their heads, we hope. And if you want more people to produce that information, you're going to have to pay them. But the way that it's working now is...
Tell Jimmy Wales that. I mean, Jimmy Wales has a new book out on trust.
Well, even Wikipedia is guilty of the thing I'm talking about. Where does all this stuff on Wikipedia come from?
It comes from people, but those people don't want to be paid. They don't seem to care. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it.
Well, it comes from people who did research, and then other people, they call, on Wikipedia, they're called editors. They go and they find this information, they repackage it, and they call it their own. And then they put it on Wikipedia, and that's fine. And Wikipedia is kind of free. It's sort of free, but they ask for donations all the time. So is that free? Free would be no donations, right? You don't have to pay anything for it. They don't,
Although we can get it for free. I didn't have to
pay
to get those screenshots.
I don't donate to Wikipedia either.
But Marshall, in a broader sense, some people might be thinking, well, you're a historian, you're an intellectual. Where'd you get all your information for? Every time we have a discussion about Russia or the internet, you don't cite where you got that data from. Right. This is a very good point. And so you have to, and the point that you're making, and is it a good one, is there is a thing, the public sphere, and there should be information in it, and there should be a lot of it, and it should be cheap. It should be available to people. This is definitely true. But there are kind of two things to say about it. We kind of need a mechanism by which the creators of this information somehow get compensated, or we're really in trouble. I mean, and you know that from the music, sort of your own writing on music and many other things. And then the second thing is that we've kind of turned an entire generation of people into content producers instead of content consumers. If you go to Facebook, Facebook is just begging you to, post pictures of your new puppy. You are the product here. They want you to do this so that other people will go look at it. But really, it's not so other people will go look at it and learn something. It's so other people go look at it and look at advertisements. That's what they want. Now, that's fine. I have nothing against advertising. On the NBN, we do advertising. It's a fine model. I totally get that. The thing that concerns me is that all of these companies, Facebook and Wikipedia, to a lesser extent, Google, like here's an example, Google. You type Marshall Poe into Google or something like that, and you're going to get some little AI thing that tells you about me. And it's probably I also get your Wikipedia entry.
Right, yeah. So you get an AI thing, and then you get a Wikipedia entry. Where does that come from? Where does all that information come from?
It comes from Gemini because Google's doing it.
It comes from the internet. Right, it comes from they're scraping the internet somehow in an amazing way, and then somehow people produced it. Like, here's an example. The picture on my Wikipedia page, I know who took that. I know what phone it came off of. I know who put it up there. I can trace it right back to the source. And I know who owns the copyright on it. It happens to be me. So it's fine. So it's totally good. But all of the other information, and I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a public sphere where there's a ton of information. The world as a research library and a searchable one, that's really great. I think that we should definitely do that. But this notion that somehow we can just go onto the internet, research any topic we want, repackage what we find in some way, and then sell advertising against it is sort of strange. And, again, this conversation was occasioned by a company that is doing this in podcasting.
Yeah, and we're not going to mention the company.
We're not
we
going to
don't want
mention
to
them.
personalize it. But so let's get to podcasting. So you've laid out your stall, Marshall, that Web 2 and maybe the AI revolution is all built around the grand larceny, the theft of other people's content. How is that going to work with AI? Are these Anthropics and OpenAIs and Geminis, are they going around essentially sweeping up all our intelligence and then feeding it back to us and charging us for it somehow?
Andrew, I really wish I could answer that question. I mean, on the New Books Network, we don't know whether we have 30,000 interviews, each of which is about an hour long. It's a lot of content. It's a lot of audio information, that is people's voices, and it's a lot of just straightforward information. Are AI companies using that? We have no idea. And in a way, none. I have no idea at all.
No one's ever come to you asking for permission?
We have been pinged by companies that are interested in licensing the content.
In AI terms, rather than just licensing?
Yes, but we've never really followed up on it. We don't have any mechanism. Google doesn't give us any mechanism. Our host doesn't give us any mechanism to find out whether the New Books Network is being scraped in that way, and then it's getting plugged into these large language models. And, in a way, given the way that Facebook works and the way that Twitter works and the way that Wikipedia works and the way that all of these companies work, why wouldn't they just steal it? I mean, we're not going to come after them. We don't have any money. I mean, there's 3 of us run the whole New Books Network. We don't have a lawyer. And if we found out they were using our information, what would we do? I don't know. I don't know what we would do. I don't know. But they are using, if they are using it, we don't know if they are. I'm not accusing them of anything. But the barrier, and this is sort of how I amended the Stuart Brand quote. The cost of that theft has gone to 0. They can just take it.
And not only can they just take it, I mean, and here's where AI is particularly resonant and perhaps threatening in an existential sense to podcasters like you and I, is rather than empowering other podcasters, it's empowering machines. So the real specter on the horizon, Marshall, are AI podcasts.
Well, yeah,
isn't that the real threat ultimately here?
Well, and this was done. I think it was called LM Notebook or something. This came out a year and a half, 2 years ago or something. And basically, you could take any.
Yeah.
And
it's a Google product.
Yeah, and it's pretty incredible, I have to say. You basically take any text of 6, 8, 10 pages, and it'll turn it into a dialogue with 2 people with whatever kind of accent.
And ironically, the guy who's sort of pioneering that at Google is Stephen Johnson, the great technologist and historian. So.
I mean, it is an amazing thing, I have to say, and it does a pretty good job. I have to say this is true, but this is just repackaging and reselling. In other words, you've taken something, you've altered it a little bit. In fact, you didn't alter it at all; a machine did, so it cost you nothing. And then you're reselling it. An analogy might be like this: you have a book or something, an article. You go to a copy machine. The copy machine is free because it's at your office. You copy the book or the article, and then you walk out on the street and sell it. I mean, that's what they're doing. You say, oh, this is different. Look, it's on different paper.
And this is actually happening right now, Marshall.
All the time, everywhere.
But will users, I mean, we have an audience. I mean, it's not Joe Rogan audience, but we have a loyal audience of people, and they're listening, partially because of you, partially because of me. Is an audience conceivably going to be interested in listening to machines talking to one another?
They're not going to know. I mean, and this is one of the things that the people that are doing this kind of trumpet to investors and things. They're saying, look, we can fake a person. We can create an influencer. I think this has already been done. I mean, there are people in your audience who know more about this than I do, because I don't really spend a lot of time in that part of the internet. But I'm pretty sure that in fact, I know for a fact that there are fake musicians. They're not real musicians. They're AI musicians that have had hits. They're probably AI journalists, no problem. They're AI writers. That is, they produce novels. You can spin these things up pretty easily. And it's very hard to tell whether it was produced by a human or by AI. At least, that's been my experience.
So is this an existential threat to something like the New Books Network? I mean, you use real people. As you said, you've got about 30,000 podcasts. You're an aggregator of smart niche podcasts on books, mainly for academics. Does this mean that ultimately in the long run you're dead?
Well, no, I don't think it does. No, I don't think it does. I mean, if you look at the history of media, you see lots of gloom and doom when a new kind of medium appears. Remember, radio was going to kill reading, and television was going to kill radio, and then the internet was going to kill television, and none of that happened. Those things are all still around. Reading and radio and television, they're all still around. And the way that we work, which, as you say, is premised on the idea that they're authors, usually researchers at universities,
real people
who go into archives and places like this or laboratories and write these books, and then we interview them about the books. This is a thing of value, and people know that. And our brand sort of speaks authenticity. We don't do AI. This isn't to say we wouldn't in some way if it was valuable to the listener. I haven't found a way in which it is, but we might do it if it would be helpful to them. So our brand really speaks authenticity, but it's because we have a brand. I mean, if you don't have a brand,
so you don't use any kind of AI. You don't use it for
no, that's not true.
Summarize.
Well, we don't even know. I don't even know if we're using AI. It's so deep in everything.
No, but in terms of your production of your podcast,
yes, you make a good point.
Because I use it to help me summarize some of our conversations, which are human.
No, we use it often in one context. We use, and I don't mind saying this because it's a great product, Adobe has something called the Vocal Enhancer, and it's AI based. And we use it quite often in order to bring out if there's background noise or if the speech is...
Oh, I need to get out of that. Vocal Enhancer.
Vocal Enhancer, yeah, it's online. You have to have an Adobe subscription to get it. And it is a pretty incredible thing.
And you run it through the podcast and it improves the quality of the audio?
Yeah, it just basically improves the quality of the audio. And it's a good product. I like it. I pay for it. I don't have any problem with it.
But you don't use any other intelligence to summarize your conversations, create transcripts, or anything like that?
No, because although I am kind of a fan of summarization, I think obviously that's a good thing to have a précis of something. We've gotten to the point now that, I mean, this is a cliche, but people's attention spans are stupidly short. I mean, I have a friend.
We're 18 minutes into this, so I hope someone's still listening.
I hope so too. But an hour and a half long New Books Network podcast about the birth of the concentration camp in South Africa or something like that. That's a complicated issue. I mean, it's a complicated topic. It can't be boiled down. I mean, you could boil it. You could try, but you're going to miss a lot.
I take your point, but on the other hand, some of the most popular podcasts are long form. Joe Rogan comes to mind. Some of his conversations are 2 or 3 hours. Someone's listening to that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And that's a point I make quite often to people who say that New Books Network podcasts are too long. I say, look, some of the most popular podcasts are extremely long. However, what entrepreneurs in the podcast space are trying to do now is use AI to make them shorter and to basically produce them with AI and not with people.
Yeah, and you sent me, we're not going to mention the company, but you sent me a pitch you got from somebody suggesting that they could shorten and summarize Hannah Arendt's Lessons in Love and Disobedience. I think that's taken from a wonderful new book on Arendt called We Are Free to Change the World by the British academic Lindsay Stonebridge. So that kind of use of AI, is that just absurd to try and package up Arendt, who's a complicated thinker, into
No,
10-second nuggets?
I don't. Well, like 10 seconds, I would say, yeah, that's a little bit.
Or 30
much,
seconds. I think the pitch was 30 seconds.
Well, it sort of depends. In that particular case, I think that's actually a good company. I think that they know what they're doing and that they have the public's interests at heart, really. And so I by all means proceed with that, because it's a little bit like I always say about Wikipedia when I used to teach. I used to teach college, and I would say to my students, Wikipedia is a good place to start. It's not a good place to end. If you end at Wikipedia, you have made a mistake, because Wikipedia is just an aggregation of what some people on the internet said. And that's really not what you want to.
That's a good introduction. Yeah.
Yeah.
It can lead you to books or other articles.
Exactly. And Wikipedia has done a good job of that with the citations and all, in that business. And so if a 5-minute introduction to that book that's produced by AI, let's say, gets somebody to read that book, good. I think that's a good thing, or leads them to the New Books Network.
But from a podcaster's point of view, if we had a 30-second summary of this conversation, which we ran before our conversation, that might attract new users or listeners, that's not a bad thing, is it?
I would call that a teaser. And, movie companies have been doing this forever. Filmmakers have been doing this forever. It's a teaser.
So in a sense, then nothing's changed, and in a sense, everything's changed. So what are you doing to ready yourself for this storm at New Books Network? What advice would you give other podcasters like myself to get ready for this storm?
Well, I mean, when people contact me, I've been doing this since 2007. When people contact me and they say, I have a podcast, but I have no listeners. And I said, I understand you have no listeners, and you're not ever going to have any, because there are too many podcasts, and there are more every day, and they're being produced by AI, and people cannot separate the wheat from the chaff, except at the extreme, 83 standard deviations from the mean, where you find Joe Rogan. Because Joe Rogan, it's a peculiar paradox. The best way to make your podcast popular is to get an article about it in the traditional media. If you just try to do it solely on the internet, it ain't going to work, because there are too many people advertising too many things there. But if the New York Times does an article on your podcast, that's going to help a lot.
Although that's chicken and egg, because you've got to have a good podcast in the first place to get in the Times.
I would say that's probably.
I mean, Rogan wasn't in the Times before he became popular.
No, but there are a lot of good podcasts. I talk to people who have great podcasts all the time. But
you're discouraging me. What's the point of even podcasting, Marshall? Should we all
I don't
just
know
give
anymore.
up?
I don't know anymore. I really don't. It's a little bit like I've written a number of books, and somebody asked me the other day, "Are you going to write another book?" And I'm like, "No way."
Why?
There are already enough books.
Enough books, enough podcasters. So what should we all be doing?
I don't know exactly. I remember when podcast, it's a very good question. I remember when podcasting appeared, and I saw what it would enable us. I was a historian teaching at a university at the time to do, and that was to talk to authors about their books. And I thought, well, that's obviously a good thing, right? If you want to know about the invention of the concentration camp by the British in South Africa or something, well, here's someplace you can go. It'll take you an hour and a half. Then maybe you can go buy the book. That's all terrific. And so I got right into it in 2007. The environment is so different today. I mean, back then there were tens of thousands of podcasts. In fact, when I started, Apple called me. The Apple Corporation called me. Can you imagine?
It wasn't Steve Jobs, was it?
No, it wasn't Steve Jobs, but they called me. They said, "Oh, we see what you're doing." I'm like, "This is great." But today, there are literally millions of podcasts, literally. Most of them are dead. That's true. And then you kind of have to drill down a little bit, and you get to, I don't know, a few 100,000 that produce episodes occasionally, and then maybe 60 or 70,000 that produce them every week. But it's just a lot. There's just a glut of.
What kind of audience? You're on the front lines of this. What kind of audience for a podcast do you need to have per episode to make it even vaguely credible?
Well, this company that's producing them with AI, they basically cost nothing to produce. They claim that if they get 20 listeners, they make money. But they're producing hundreds of podcasts, and they're producing 3,000 episodes a week.
So all you need is 20.
If you can make it for free.
But then half those listeners are probably bots.
Well, they may
most
be,
of the
yeah.
listeners.
But
So it's
for a podcast like ours, or especially a scripted podcast, those are the really expensive ones. And, I think the Serial phenomenon gave people the wrong impression, because what Serial really was a radio show that was distributed as a podcast. It really wasn't. It was a radio show. It was a great radio show, and it cost a fortune to produce. And it was fun to listen to. And it was from the This American Life people, and it was really great. The people that made that really knew what they were doing, but they were trained in an environment of great constraints, huge constraints, because they were doing radio. And, in order to get heard on the radio, you need a radio station. And then podcasting came along, and everybody had a radio station. And then people like me saw it and said, oh, hey, you know what I can do? I can do something I've kind of always wanted to do. And, it's a good thing. Kind of, we're a public education project, and we hope that people listen to us and that they learn something. I mean, to directly answer your question, how many people, it really all depends on the cost of production, and that's why most podcasts are simply two people talking, because the cost of production is really low.
Well, for you at New Book Network, let me be more specific. What kind of audience do you need per show to make it economically viable?
I can't answer that question directly. I can say that on the NBN, we get between 3,000 and 6,000 downloads per episode, and we produce 10 episodes a day. We do about 1 million downloads a month, and so that's 12 million a year.
And you're making money.
Well, it employs 3 of us. That doesn't mean we're making money.
And you share the revenue with the producers, because you're not creating the content. You have
No, we're not. And this is another thing that makes us a little bit like Wikipedia in a way. The hosts on the New Books Network are usually professors or graduate students who simply want to talk to their colleagues. And what we say to them is this: you can participate in podcasting and talk to your colleagues, and we'll get your voice out there. All you have to do is sign up and do the interview, and we'll do everything else. And so we do all the technical back end. We produce the podcast, we promote the podcast, we distribute the podcast, we do all of that stuff. And there's no reason they should be doing it. They're content producers. Why should they be doing it? If you write a book, you don't print it yourself. You have a publishing house print it. Similarly with this, these people are willing to volunteer their time because, well, there are various reasons they do it, but one of them is we make it very easy for them. So our costs of production are very, very low. There are only 3 people that work at the NBN and, make money. I mean, we have revenue. And
so what you're most fearful when it comes to AI, Marshall, is that the algorithms will somehow acquire the intelligence from the podcasts that you run on your network, steal your content, reproduce it, and sell it, and not give you any credit.
That's basically right. Yeah, I would say that's basically right. Now, of course, this is you have to be there's a subtlety here, because as you say, you do want this information in the public sphere. You want people to be able to learn from it, and you want people in Pakistan to be able to listen to it who have no money, and people in Manhattan who have a lot of money. But you want all of them to be able to listen. So the question is, how does it get into the public sphere? And my only point is that, well, it's really 2 points. One has to do with authenticity. It's really not a good idea to fake people out. That's just called fakery. It's either a real person or it isn't. And you need to say whether it's a real person or it isn't.
How would you prove you're a real person?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I mean, I sometimes ask that when we have AI shows.
I don't know. We're going to get pretty philosophical here pretty quick. Like, am I a real person? I might be AI. Who knows? But I don't know. I don't know how you would do it. But yeah, we do want it to get into the public sphere, though, and I agree with that, and I want that to happen. I don't want any kind of restrictions on it, but I want the content producers to be compensated so they can continue to do that thing that they do. And right now, the people who are making all of the money are people who are taking content, rebroadcasting it, or repackaging it and selling advertising against it. I mean, we've already talked on this show about YouTube. YouTube is astounding in the sense that you can find things there which are definitely copyrighted, I don't know. And you can watch.
And the foundations of I've written extensively on this, the foundations of YouTube back in 2003 and 4. I mean, that was overt mass larceny.
Yeah, and they, and the thing about it is that there's such an asymmetry of power between the content producers and Google. As I've said, as far as I know, Google has 1,000 lawyers on staff.
Yeah, and actually, one of those lawyers is my wife. She's the head of litigation.
I'm sure she's a great person too.
I don't know that. She's a great lawyer, that's for sure. What about all the money going into this? We've got $3 trillion of AI investment. So, does that make you fearful as well, Marshall? That
makes me a little
$3 trillion. That could pay off much of the U.S. debt.
Yeah, obviously it makes me
is being poured into this new wave of technological exuberance.
Honestly, it makes me a little jealous because I don't think we're getting any of that money.
Well, you're not getting $3 trillion, are you?
No, I mean we're producing the content, but nobody's come to us and said, "Yeah, here you go, here's some money." I don't know exactly. I mean, clearly, one of the this is a different conversation, but one of the difficulties that venture capitalists always face is trying to find some sort of investment that will be a sort of unicorn that will yield a huge amount of money. And clearly a lot of people have bet big on this. Whether it'll work, I don't know. So far in my life, the only AI anything that has made any difference is Adobe Speech Enhancer.
Yeah, I'm going to go and use that. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to be in Amsterdam at a Cape Gemini summit, and I'm going to be talking about whether big tech can be trusted to design our agentic future. Can we trust big tech in any way? Can we learn from the past, or can big tech learn from the past? Do you see any evidence that companies like Google have actually learned from some of the damage they've done, or is history just repeating itself endlessly?
What I see big tech do is they go into, let's call it a market or some sort of sphere, they destroy it, and then they feel bad about it. And so then they create a foundation or something. And I'm thinking particularly of Craig Newmark and Craigslist. So right. He destroyed American newspapers.
Inadvertently, he didn't know what
inadvertently, he didn't mean to do it. No, right. But he took the classified income stream away from newspapers. That was bad for newspapers. And then he felt really bad about it. And so he started a foundation or a school, right? I think, and Facebook does the same kind of thing. I'm thinking of the Facebook friends and family policy that came out, I think it was when Trump was first elected. And basically Facebook became a cesspool.
Although I think it'd be rather generous to compare Mark Zuckerberg with Craig Newmark.
No,
generous to Zuckerberg, not Newmark.
And I've heard Newmark speak a few times, and he's a very intelligent guy. He should be listened to. There's no question about it. I don't know about Zuckerberg. I haven't heard him, but Facebook, they go in and they destroy markets, and so they started this friends and family policy because Facebook had become a cesspool of political yelling. It just was terrible. And so basically they took political stuff off of it, right? Because they felt bad because it was hurting people's feelings. Oh, okay, that's good. I guess that's good. Of course, the advertising revenue continued to pour in. They didn't have any problem with that. So I think they break things and then they feel bad about it and they come back. And it's not like you can roll back the clock. Classified ads are not coming back to newspapers. There's no question about this. So can they be trusted? I don't know.
That doesn't sound very positive.
Well, it depends on what I mean, people used to make fun. Maybe I've talked about this on your show before, but people used to make fun of the original. I don't think it's currently the original Google motto or something. Don't be evil.
Yes.
But that's actually not a bad motto, because if you look at like the 10 Commandments, they're all don't do this. It's much harder to say what you should do than what you shouldn't do. And so if they keep that in mind, then maybe they'll be okay.
How important is a vital podcast ecosystem for democracy in your view? I mean, again, you don't need me to tell you that American democracy is not in its best shape. Right. Do you see a connection between all this technological chaos and the crisis of the creatives and a crisis. You're a historian, so you've done a lot of thinking about this and the crisis of American democracy.
I mean, I think, as a historian, I don't think there's really that much new here, especially when it comes to this. It's really a cliche at this point that Americans are more divided than they've ever been. Well, that's just not true. We fought a civil war. In the 1960s, in about 1970, bombings were a daily occurrence in the United States. Daily. You can look it up. Like, political assassination was just nothing in the early 70s. So we've been really divided before. And, in terms of content producers like the Nubix Network or anybody in the kind of what you might call intellectual space, there's always been the option of what I call going political. And you're going to get an audience that way. And if you look at, the magazine universe in the United States, you can see that a long time ago. Andrew, do you remember when the New Yorker wasn't political? I do. Remnick came, though, and he said, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to pick a side, and we're going to do this. And it's going to be good for revenue. And it was. And so now the New Yorker is basically an organ of the Democratic Party, which is fine. Okay, it's their magazine.
I'm not sure if that's
mine.
good either for the New Yorker or the Democratic Party, but that's another.
Right, but it's a kind of business decision. It's like, what should we do? Should we go political or not? Now on the Nubix Network, we have not and will not. I guarantee you, I will quit before I go political. I just pick a side and then start yelling at people. We're not going to do that. So this has been going on for a long time. And it's just a new medium in which it's going on. So, some of the, Charlie Kirk, of blessed memory, I guess, he had a podcast in which he said right-wing things.
Particularly
right?
Popular now.
Right, he said right-wing things, right? And then there's somebody on the left, I don't know who it would be. I'm sure they have a podcast too. And they appeal to people on the left. And this is not a new thing. It's a business model. It's a decision.
Do you see, Marshall, as you said, you're putting out a ton of podcasts. You're one of the biggest aggregators. A lot of people fearful about new censorship. Jimmy Kimmel just got shut down in a post-Kirk America. Have you seen any evidence of more censorship online? People putting pressure on you or your podcasters to say or not say a certain thing?
Well, I mean, there are certain topics that are kind of hot button issues. And if you touch them, people are going to contact you. So
like what?
Well, like Israel-Palestine. If we touch that, and we do, people write me and say, Israel bad or Palestine bad.
Yeah, but they're not shutting you down.
No, they're not shutting us down. No. And they, although we did receive a threat the other day, not a bomb threat or anything, but a legal threat. I didn't take it very seriously, and I don't think it was very serious.
What kind of threat?
I don't really want to go into the details of it, but if that's okay.
Over a Middle Eastern podcast?
Yeah, it was over Israel Palestine podcast, and people are obviously extremely heated, and if you touch that subject, you're going to get. But the thing about the Nubix Network is, we have this kind of insulating layer. I always tell people, if you hear an author say something on the Nubix Network, it's the author speaking, not us. We're not saying that. The author is saying that. So if you have a problem with what the author says, you should contact the author. And then you can have a
threaten
dialogue.
the author, not Marshall.
Right,
anyone listening.
Don't threaten anybody. Please don't threaten anybody. Yeah.
No, don't threaten.
No,
we're not encouraging violence on this show. So finally, Marshall, as I said, we did a show last year on why 2024 was a bad year for most podcasters. Is 2025 any better, or is it equally bad so far?
I would say for a certain kind of podcast, it's better. It's better for podcasts, and I guess I would call it the public education space. And that's largely because I think foundations and people with significant amounts of capital have seen that these are the kinds of things you want to keep around. It's a little known fact about magazines like The Atlantic and The New Yorker and Harper's and so on and so forth. For decades, they just bled money. And the only reason they continue.
Well, there's a big, you bring up Harper's and Atlantic. They're very different. I know Harper's quite well. We work with them. It's being financed on a shoestring by one of the MacArthurs. But the Atlantic is getting money from Steve Jobs' widow.
Right.
And it's massively financed.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point is that I think that there are certain public-spirited Americans and people outside there that look at the podcast space and say something, here's a podcast that actually serves the public interest. It's not making money. It's going to close. Let's subsidize it. And, it's unfortunate that this has to, that we have to go this route. Would it that advertising or whatever, donations could fund it? but that really isn't the case. So, insofar as these foundations start to think, well, these are an important part of the civic dialogue, and they help fund them, I mean, that's a good thing, I think. Again, I'm kind of ambivalent about it because that's soft money. It could end at any time, as opposed to advertising revenue, which
soft money is better than no money, though.
That's right. Soft money is much better than no money. So I'm.
So there's more. So what you're saying is that 2025 is turning out to be a year where there's more soft money available for podcasts.
I think my impression is that there is, because people have started to. And podcasting's not new. It's been around for a while, and people in these foundations are starting to recognize that some of these podcasts are actually very good for democracy, and they're good for the.
Wow.
And not just foundations, but also universities and institutes and things like this. So, these are good institutions. We want to support them. And that's, and that's a good thing. Would it that big tech said the same thing? I mean, I don't know how they would do it.
Would you take money from big tech if someone from Google called you up and said, we like what you're doing at the New Books Network, we want to underwrite you?
I definitely would, but I would say we get this money from Google. I wouldn't hide it at all.
Transparency.
I would absolutely say that we got this money from Google. That's what NPR does. They say, look, when they do a story on Google, they say right at the top of the, of the article, NPR is partially funded by Google, but we treat them like anybody else, and that's what we would do. We would treat them like anybody else.
So Marshall, you are like me in some ways a professional pessimist, but you've actually cheered me up in a way, because I don't think you're suggesting that AI is any more of an existential event to creatives like you and I than any other new technology. It's not the final chapter. Is that what you're suggesting? It's just one more chapter in an endless narrative of tech undermining creative people.
Yeah, I think that's basically right. I mean, I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, but I think you are. You definitely.
I'm very young, man.
Right, me
much
too.
Younger than you.
There's a company, and I can't remember the name of the company. Their business line was nothing but summarizing business books. That's what they did.
Oh yeah.
So one of your listeners will tell us who it is, and they did very well for decades. I mean, isn't that what AI is doing? It's just a little bit more. It's much more efficient. It's the same product. It's a summarized book, or whatever.
But it's not as explicit. I mean, when you look at OpenAI or Anthropic, Claude, increasingly, especially with this AGI supposedly on the horizon, it won't acknowledge that it's a summary. It will present itself in almost human form.
Well, that's exactly my point, is that they're repackaging something and calling it new. The people that did the business books never claimed to really be producing anything new. They said, we're going to take something that's old and out there, and we're going to summarize it and sort of repackage it for you. But it's really the book. It's from the book. That's the deal. And AI doesn't do that. At least, it tries to cite sources and web pages and things. It can't do a very good job of it. But it doesn't really tell you where the information came from. And this is kind of it's a dangerous thing for content producers. It's a dangerous thing for consumers, because you don't know where it comes from. Where did you learn that? I got it on the internet.
As our friend Stuart Brand says, information wants to be free. Certainly, wealthy tech companies want information to be quote unquote free because they profit from it. Finally, Marshall, wonderful conversation as always. I hope we'll run this also on the New Books Network. Two pieces of very short advice from Marshall Poe, the real Marshall Poe, not the AI Marshall Poe. For podcasters and for listeners, because people are listening to this and they value it. What should people, I mean, there's the Substack model as well. Should listeners have to pay, or could they pay directly podcasters or New Book Networks? Is that way of subverting the advertising model?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah, and some podcasts work that way, and Substack works that way. Yeah, but generally speaking, I mean, we know the answer to the question, would people prefer advertisements or subscriptions? And the answer is advertisements. We know that. They would rather listen to advertisement than pay $15 a month. Okay.
And that's an interesting conclusion. And finally, for podcasters, for someone, I think you've said this earlier, but for anyone who doesn't have a podcast, who's thinking of putting one together, is Marshall Poe's advice, don't?
I would say it's don't. No, your time is probably better spent doing something else, figuring out what the next big thing is, because this one has now hit, and you'd be entering a market that is beyond glutted with content. And that isn't to say that if you just love your topic and you really want to do this and you're producing it for your grandchildren, you shouldn't do it. You should do it. But don't expect to make a living from it, because you're not going to.
I've got the title for this show, Marshall, Beyond Glutted Podcasting. Is there a word for beyond glutted? I don't know.
Stuffed? I don't know.
Well, as always, Marshall, real pleasure. You're miserable like me, but it's good to have a few miserable old white guys on the internet telling the world how technology is ruining the world. It's, as always, a pleasure and an honor. Keep well, Marshall. Keep doing your great stuff at the New Books Network. It's a really important network. Wonderful content. I hope this will run on that one too. And we'll talk again, certainly by the end of the year, to talk more broadly about what kind of year 2025 has been for podcasts.
Sounds great. Well,